We've come along to the Jupiter Centre in Sunderland to speak with Paul McEldon, Chief Executive of the North East Business Innovation Centre and Deputy Chairman of the Federation of Enterprise Agencies in the North East, to hear his opinion on the local enterprise partnerships and to see whether more clarity is needed if the government is to meet its rhetoric of a private sector-led recovery. Okay, Paul, thanks for coming along to join us. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the local enterprise partnerships. Can you tell me what legacy the RDAs are going to leave behind and when this is going to be coming into effect?
Well, as far as I'm aware, the RDAs finish at the end of March next year. However, effectively, they're finishing at the end of March this year, and it's a transition period of them running down their activities over the next year. There was obviously a lot of money going through the RDAs. £300 million a year was going through the North East RDA. And that obviously brought a lot of spend in the local economy, which will be lost. The LEPs, as I understand, are going to have a small amount of money which they can invest to understand better their market, but not necessarily to invest in businesses and the regional economy. So that legacy, purely from a spend point of view, is going to be massive, and the new LEP isn't going to fill that gap.
Can you give me a basic of what and who the LEPs will be made up of?
It's still going to be private sector led, as I understand. I think a really encouraging statement lately has been that Paul Walker, who's ex of Sage, has taken over the chairmanship of the Northern LEP. A match of local authority and business organisations or business people will make up the rest of the board on an equal basis. Obviously, a lot more accountability. A lot more elected representatives on the LEP as compared to the RDAs in the past. So I think it's about local accountability being a bit more through the LEPs than we currently had under the RDAs.
So where does the LEP get its funding from?
The funding will come from the local authorities themselves and the partners within the local enterprise partnership. I think the money coming from central government to do local things isn't the plan. However, as it'll be the only regional or sub-regional route that we have in the region, what the government has plans for them in the near future or the longer term, we're unaware. It could be used as that vehicle to put other government policies and other government initiatives through in the future, but they haven't actually said that.
Do you think the confusion over the LEPs is hampering business growth and is undermining the government's rhetoric to have a private sector-led recovery?
I think there's less money, which is always going to have an effect. I think that would have happened regardless of whether there was a regional development agency or an LEP. I think the drive to have more private sector influence over what's happening is what the drive for the LEPs is going to be. They have a more strategic role than, I think, delivery role than the regional development agencies had. So I think it's about bringing together the private and the public sector in partnership on a more equal partnership to influence the environment really that businesses are going to be able to work in the future.
There has been concern about whether the funding will exceed the 4 million capacity fund. Do you think this will hinder any form of private sector growth?
The capacity fund that's been mentioned is still a competition for all of the other LEPs to bid for, and it is for the LEP partners to gain a better understanding of what is going on in their environment so that they can make better informed decisions. It isn't to give out to businesses. There is some money called the Regional Growth Fund, which is a pot of money that the government has put aside, which is again another competition on a national basis for private sector and public sector bids to stimulate growth and stimulate jobs. The first round of that funding was closed at the end of January. There's some announcements to be made in the very near future about the first round of that funding, which will allocate something up to £500 million on stimulating private sector growth. However, it still doesn't match the amount of money that was going through the RDAs.
So will North East firms be able to apply for this type of funding?
It's supposedly being targeted towards those areas that are going to suffer most from the effects of the public sector cuts. Now, as we know in the North East, we've got a high percentage of public sector organisations in our economy. So if it's true to its word, then we should get a higher proportion than other areas. However, it is based upon good, sensible, private sector-led bids to stimulate that growth. If we haven't got those, we won't get our allocation.
With 1 in 3 jobs in the North East supported by the public sector, do you think that this is going to impact private sector businesses due to there being a lack of confidence in the market?
I think everybody's going to take a hit. You can't, you'd be naive to say that everybody isn't going to take a hit. It's how you react to that. The role of the LEPs, as I understand, is to create that environment where we can take advantage of whatever opportunities are out there. We've, as a Chief Executive of the North East Business Innovation Centre, we've been through 2 or 3 recessions. And what's basically happened is that it's stimulated a lot of business startup, whether that's through necessity or anything else. But we've seen a marked increase in the number of people wanting to set up their own businesses from a private sector point of view because of the environment. So there's a little bit of push and a little bit of pull, but we need to create the environment that the private sector will be able to take advantage of.
Can you tell me what powers the LEPs will have, and is this in conjunction with what the RDA's had?
They've both had a strategic role, again, about looking at what's going on in our particular areas or our LEP area, and then trying to create and foster the right environment for businesses. So from that point of view, fairly similar. The local enterprise partnerships will have pretty statutory roles as well around housing, around transport and planning. And I think it's about working with the private sector to make sure that best use is made of the powers that they have, the powers around those particular areas, to make sure that the environment for businesses to flourish within that is made easier.
Do you think the LEPs have, in essence, a lack of power, and do you think there needs to be more support from local government on this?
There's a danger that the LEPs are talking shops. There's no money there to run them, so the local authorities and the private sector are going to have to decide how they run these things, and that's a hurdle before you even start. And then obviously the intention at the moment is for them to be self-funding. With the stretches on public finances as they are at the moment, that's going to be a challenge. However, as I said before, as government develops over the next few years, it'll be a vehicle through which government can put money and policies and other things which hopefully in the future prove themselves as having an influence, and then the funding may come in the future.
Do you agree that the government's decision on the LEPs, which puts business at the centre of the decisions, will make the necessary difference?
I think it will. As I say, and I think the recently appointed chairman will give it that gravitas. It'll get people interested in it, which is what you want. You want businesses to be engaged and interested in what's going on. If they can get some early hits, and maybe the enterprise zone gives it something to realise that it has got influence, it has got some effect on where things are going to happen and what's going to be happening. It'll create a snowball effect, hopefully, and businesses will be much more engaged and understand that they can have an effect on what's going on in their own environment.
Do you think it's a fair comment to say that the RDAs have perhaps failed if we're bringing in LEPs?
Failure is a difficult word. Like any organisation, there's very, very good things and there's very, very things that could be done better. But I think personally, I think our RDA had a good effect, and it's like anything else where it's disappeared, then you perhaps realise a little bit more about what effects it did have.
What lessons do you think can be learnt from the RDAs moving forward?
Having a regional voice does matter. I think having somebody to represent the region with national government does have an effect. I think regional policy is not flavour of the month at the moment. It's more localism than it is regionalism. But without money, as I say, I don't think either of those policies will have some element of effect. The whole regional, the RDA focus was around built in things like skills and what I'd class as economic development. Some of those things might get lost in the LEPs, might not have as big a focus. One of the concerns I have with the organisation I'm involved in is that local enterprise partnerships don't actually deal with enterprise. They deal with economic. People talk about local economic partnerships. They're not local economic partnerships, they're local enterprise partnerships. Enterprise is about all businesses, very, very small businesses. The North East economy still has an enormous amount of small businesses. And one of the concerns is that the voice of enterprise isn't heard on the LEP boards.